Book 3. 1. Now, however, those things which pertain to the creation of the world and the deeds of the gods have been narrated in the first and second books. Sanchuniathon relates that Leontergus and Amorius were brothers, sons of the Cabiri. But Amorius saw him passing by in splendid garments and drawing a sword in his right hand, and ran up to him and demanded the garment from him. When he had given it, Leontergus envied his brother for his colorful attire, and plotted against his life. But Amorius escaped and built a fortress in a certain place, where he was safe from his brother's plots. A little later, some refugees who had been expelled from the Moalics inhabited this very region. In this way the town of Phoenicia was founded. The son of Amorius founded the city of Arad. But Amorius at first lived with the son of Sidamus, the founder of the city of Sidom. When that city was devastated, Amorius fled to Chittim. All, therefore, who afterwards held the empire of Phoenicia and Arad, had their origin from Amorius. 2. Baaltes gave the kingdom to Leontergus of the Byblians, during whose reign the Moalics broke into the city and laid waste. Leontergus was so distressed by the calamity of the city that he was soon seized with disease and died. They buried the dead in the tomb of the kings. When this was not long afterwards in ruins, his clothing and sword were preserved, but the body was nowhere to be found. So that it was evident that he had been taken away by the gods for the sake of his integrity. For he gave 300 slaves to the temple of Baaltes. He had a harsh character, as is evidenced by the fact that he himself would inspect the watches at night, and if he happened to offend someone drunk, he would kill them. He assumed the empire at the age of 39 and reigned for 50 years. 3. In his place was substituted Rhinerus, whom I do not know where he was born or what kind of man he was. For I have not found anything about him except his name. When this king died, the giants stormed the city, and either massacred the inhabitants or took captives with them. But the multitude of the enemy was consumed by the fire of heaven, and others fled to the sea. But those who had escaped the flames and the waves were massacred by the Bybli on the shore. For in those days there were no buildings to be found near the harbor, but the place between the city and the sea was empty. 4. Then they made Agarius the son of Leontergus king. When he entered the temple of Baaltides, the priest passed him by and anointed a certain Sidicus king. Sidicus, who had been created king in this way in place of Agarius, was a just and strong man, but of short and deformed physique. During his reign, the giants did not descend. But the Sarati, who came from the islands with a large fleet and wanted the greatest booty. When this was reported to the king, he asked for help from the Sidonians, Tyrians, and Berythians. The kings of the Sidonians and Berythians were present with 4,000 armed men. But the Tyrians were unable to provide assistance, because after the death of the king there had been unrest in their city. Sidicus found the enemy already on land and killed a large part of them and put the rest to flight. Among the captives were also Gorus and Golus, the enemy leaders, to whom he restored their freedom the next day, and took from them a great deal of gold and 100 slaves, the ransom price, of which Sidicus and his companions shared. In all the towns this battle was celebrated with songs and joyful shouts. Proclaim Sidicus and the king's valor happy. Celebrate the valor of Sidicus. Indeed, an eagle puts 100 young men of the Berythians to flight, and Sidon, a lion, 400. Sidicus captured Gorus and Golus. The king took the 2 kings captive with him. He made the Aradians share in the spoils, and the Sidonians hear. Proclaim the valor of the king happy and celebrate Sidicus. Bring justice. 5. The Serates set out with their fleet for the southern regions. At the same time, the Gigantes of Ascalon were carrying on a war with their neighbors, the Onychines, and having been defeated by their enemies, they gladly received the Serates. With their help, they defeated the enemy and subdued the entire region of the Onychines. Therefore, expressing gratitude for the help they gave the town of Gaza, which they had taken from the enemy, The Sarrates fortified this town and at first lived in peace. Later, having acquired great power, they waged a very serious war with the Ascalonites and expelled them from their homeland. But they fled to the mountains and inhabited the mountainous regions. The Sarrates, however, brought the entire region up to the borders of Egypt under their control, but they were unable to conquer the mountainous regions. 6. Sidicus reigned for 30 years. At that time, Garasaus, the eldest son of Sidicus, was created king, who, pretending to be just, committed great injustices. For he expelled Bethabelus from the city, because he envied the man's honesty. However, at the same time he was called a follower of Satan. But his pride was greater than his modesty. During the reign of Garasaus, a certain priest of Satan did not eat the least morsel of food for many years, and yet he did not die. Garasaus died after a reign of 18 years. At his death there was a long interregnum. The islanders, however, landed ships and devastated the whole region, because the Sarrati had received Obadillus, who had previously held the government of the islands, but whom they had expelled from the islands because of his pride among them. For in the war in the island port, some stood on the king's side, others made Obadillus king, a proud man. But when the victorious king had escaped, Obadillus fled to the Serratus, plundering Gaza and attempting to attack the towns of the Serratus. They also attempted to attack the Biblians, who promised great gifts to the enemy if they would leave, but did not pay their promise. But at night they overpowered the enemy, and killed some, and captured others. But those who had been left at the ships, they quickly released. 7. For 25 years there was no king in Bybli. Then Bethabelus returned, and took the kingdom. When he was quite a boy, his mother died. The rash and frivolous boy therefore caused his father great grief, and his father tried in vain to bring him to obedience. But when he saw his mother angry with him in a dream, he changed his mind. While he was reigning, Obadillus went out to the city and implored Bethabelus for help. He also promised to help him. For Obadillus was indeed of a proud disposition, but a worshipper of Uranus. So Bethabelus waged war with the islanders and, victorious, restored Obadillus to the kingdom, who built many altars of exceptional size on the islands. 8. Bethabelus was the first to build an inn in the city, and Melichorus, who succeeded him, enlarged this house. In those times, 2 brothers fortified the mountain of Orbium and inhabited this region. But the neighbors mocked them for the town they had founded and said, "Oh, the wonderful town of Barca! For which reason this city is even now called Bethataba." 9. After the death of Obadillus, Eryx, the son of Obadillus, was king. But Bethabelus, when he heard that Eryx had torn down the altars which Obadillus had built to Saturn, sent him ambassadors to restore the altars. But Eryx not only restored those which had already existed, but also added many and great ones. All this is read in the commentaries on the deeds of Bethabelus. 10. At the time when the kingdom of the Biblians was in the hands of Bethabelus, Mathabalus lived with many herds near the river of Syria, oppressed by no one. But a little later, shepherds who had set out from Syria quarreled with him about the pastures. But when they were grazing their flocks in meadows that were not theirs, Mathabalus called together his men and attacked them at night, rebuked him all, and forced him to build the city of Amathe for themselves, and a citadel, from which the city is named, for Amathe is the citadel of the Syrians. In the meantime, Mathabalus, having acquired great power, also subdued the remaining shepherds, who paid him tribute of 100 oxen and 400 sheep every year. In this way Mathabalus was the first king of the Syrians. After his death, Balmacanes assumed the kingdom, who had been sent by Mathabalus with an army against the mountain giants, and who happened to return victorious with his soldiers to the city at the same time. But when he showed himself cruel and killed many in the city, Amisus, who came from the order of shepherds who helped the citizens, deprived him of his kingdom and expelled him from the city. He was therefore made an exile, and for a long time wandering, he said these words: Amasis expelled me from the city, and the slaves held me in derision, but I will scourge the slaves. And I will kill Amasis. Once I rested in Tyrian purple, and my pillow was woven of Babylonian silk. But now the rock is my home, and the desert is my pillow. Do not think that I am afraid when darkness envelops the forest, and storms shake the trees, like the roar of some wild beast. Nor that I am afraid of the moonlight shining on the rocks, or the pale faces looking out from every clod. But is the lion afraid, surrounded by the darkness of his lair, or have you seen the boar seized with fear? The boar roams the forest undaunted, but the roar of the lion instills fear in his enemies. These things are related in the book of poems. 11. But when Amasis had died, Balmacanes returned to his country and reigned for 27 years. But when he was dead, the Amethyst decreed that every general returning to the city with an army should be put to death, lest he should in future obtain such a government. For this reason the generals did not enter the city, but chose one of the captives and, adorned with the general's clothes, sent him into the city with his army, where, entering the gate with his army, he was slaughtered in the place of the emperor. But the next day alone the general himself went into the city, and received rewards for his valor, which had indeed long been the custom among them. But a long time after Bariabas, after the battle he had fought against the giants, he obtained the kingdom, not by force, but by corrupting the soldiers with much money on his return. The place is still called the Meadow of Corruption, but in the language of the Amethyst Cerzoata, and it is situated in Caelesseria, where Melcaranus Sidonius was defeated by the giants. But those who trace their origin to Bariaba reign to this day. And this, and those who reigned after him in Amathe, none of the kings in all Syria was greater in power. 12. Now Bethabalus reigned 40 years. After his death, when there were no kings for a long time, Semphis and Sergus, brothers born in Egypt, harassed the Biblians. For the exiles came to the country of the Saracens. But when they had killed the king of the Saracens, they fled to the mountains. From there they went into the desert, which is situated between Byblus and Berytus. There they found a rock, surrounded by a ravine without a path, which they shared, in order to prevent the enemy from approaching. Which was so, that no one could be found who could cross and attack them. But they mounted horses, fierce and fit for leaping, and safely crossed the ravine. For whole days they lay in wait for those who passed by, and they killed and plundered those they captured. Then they returned to their castle. They also saw a virgin endowed with great beauty and carried her off by force near the city. But on their return they quarreled about the virgin. They therefore decided to draw lots to see to whom the girl should be. But the maiden, who happened to be riding Semphis' horse, as they dismounted and retreated a little, seized the reins of another horse, and, loosening the bridle, rode into the city. Semphi and Sergus, astonished at the sight, followed her. When they learned of the maiden's deed, all the citizens assembled to lay siege to the robbers. When they had caught them alive, they slaughtered them before the city gate. This maiden was named Adramasi. She bore men endowed with a warlike spirit, the kings of the Biblians. The horses were called Dolichorus and Mira. For they called Dolichorus one who can leap over a wall, and Mira one who is swift-footed. Those who derive their origin from these horses are still said to be the swiftest on foot. And the descendants of Adramasi are the most skilled in horsemanship. The fortifications have indeed already fallen, but the abyss can be seen to this day, and is open in a very narrow place 25 feet in width. Opposite is the gate of the citadel. From these causes the tower is called the Rock of the Egyptians. All these things are described in the poems of Nama. 13. After this, for a long time there was no king in the city of the Biblians. But some rich men harassed the Biblians, driving some out of the city, and killing others. But the Biblians were in a low mood, since no one was found who had attempted to punish their pride. Now Gero, a man of peace, had a tame oryx, which Barides, one of their proudest, refused to give when he asked. In the presence of many, Barides concealed his anger, but the next day, entering the house of Jerry with his men, he killed Jerry lying in bed and a slave who had tried to help his master, but Jerry, who had won the greatest favor of the citizens. The massacre aroused a great sedition in the city. For the Biblians met at night and expelled those proud and insolent people from the city. 14. A long war was waged between him, when they sought to return to the city, but the citizens drove them away. They therefore fled to the king of the Sidonians, and at first they tried in vain to return to the city, but soon the city was betrayed to them, for they came at night. And the traitor held out a torch to them, so that they could easily enter the city. But then many of the citizens either perished or fled. Finally the Biblians made Jabad king, the eldest son of that brave maiden, Adramusa. He was the first to reign after the death of Bethabel. For after the death of Bethabel there was an interregnum in the city of the Biblians for 20 years. But while Jabad was reigning, the Egyptians waged many cruel wars. 15. For after the death of Tortoise and those who descended from him, the kings of Egypt, when they waged war against the shepherds who lived by the sea, were defeated. Many perished in the battle. But those who had fled gathered themselves together in a great city, where they were besieged by the shepherds. But they were in the greatest misery, so that many even perished from hunger. But when they were pressed by the want of all things, a certain priest found scythe-drawn chariots and reported this matter to the king. But the king prepared 100 chariots, and soon overcame the enemy, and recovered all the country that had belonged to Tortoise, and drove out all the shepherds. But he did not take the impregnable citadel situated by the sea. In this way it came about that the Egyptians were the first of all to use scythe-drawn chariots. 16. Defeated in battle by the king, the shepherds left Egypt, and many settled in Arabia, where large tracts were uninhabited by men, and the fields were grazed by cattle. But their leaders were Omlachus, and Adumas, and Ammon, and Mobus, whose descendants even in our times rule the Omlacenes, and the Idumeans, and the Ammonites, and the Moabites. Many also migrated to the Serates, and to the mountainous regions to the Gigantus, and made alliances. They built many fortified towns for themselves, and for a long time inhabited the mountains. But since they had horses and chariots, they instilled great fear in all their neighbors. The Asebuni and the Indari trace their origin from them. All this is described in the book of Taauti. 17. Among the exiles was also Damascon, who at first inhabited the region of the Ceratos, and made an alliance with the Onachini. But he went into Syria and founded the city of Damascus. Semphis and Sergus, the exiles, were killed by the Biblians. These are the ones who fled from Egypt, but Judas and Somiron emigrated, while Sislon the son of Nasusius reigned over the Sidonians, Nidobos over the Tyrians, Obrocospius over the Aradians, and Dothropes over the Onachini. But the Biblians at the same time were without a king. The rest of the Jews and Somirons lived in the country of the Idumeans.